Hey there, everybody. This is Tom Funk with Trail Tales with another episode for you. This will be from our Portages, Pathways, and Paddles from a project I am currently working on. Today I'm going to tell you about who is credited with being the first European to step foot in the state of Michigan, and that person is Etienne Brule. And let's not forget that Michigan had been settled by Native Americans for 10,000 or more years. Etienne Brule is just the person that is recognized as being the first European to find his way into the state of Michigan. So I'll start with a excerpt from his biography by Butterfield, which was written in 1898, and I quote, "The voyage of Columbus in the year 1492 led to an explorer, John Cabot, 5 years later, who probably reached the coast of Labrador and that of the island of Newfoundland. A year later, his son Sebastian explored the continent from Labrador to Virginia and possibly as far south as Florida. The visit of the elder Cabot was supplemented by one Gaspar Cordial in 1500, followed that by John Verrazano, who in 1524 passed up the coast from about the latitude of the present Wilmington, North Carolina, to Newfoundland. To this country he gave the name of New France, which, although subsequently restricted on the seacoast, was extended to a vast region inland." So that was the very beginning of European discovery of today's North America. And after thousands of years of Native Americans occupying the North American continent, Europeans are now on the scene. And as time is concerned, we are only a recent newcomer. Albeit Europeans were initially exploring only the seacoast, it wasn't until James Cartier of France, who set sail from Malo on April 20th, 1534, for the coast of Newfoundland with the intent to explore into unknown inland areas of this new world. He sailed around Newfoundland and entered Chaleurs Bay, landed in a smaller bay known today as Gaspe, and declared the region in the name of France. Unbeknownst to him at the time, he was on a watercourse that would eventually lead the way to the colonization of North America by Europeans. This watercourse, of course, is the St. Lawrence River. He returned to France that fall, and then returned back to the St. Lawrence the following year with 110 people, provisions, and finally setting at Mount Royal, which is today's Montreal. At Montreal, Cartier gleaned information from the local Native Americans about there being copper, large lakes, and other navigable rivers that led into the interior. Cartier overwintered and continued to penetrate up the St. Lawrence, having found the Lachine Rapids. It wasn't until 1603 that Samuel Champlain set sail for New France with the express intent and purpose of finding the Northwest Passage, or at least a route to Asia. Although Champlain's goals were lofty, he eventually hired a woodsman and explorers to penetrate and map the interior in search of this passage. It is here in our story where Champlain hired Etienne, or Stephen Brule, to do his bidding. Stephen Brule is thought to be from Champigny-sur-Marne near Paris. He was born as a peasant. He migrated to New France in 1608 as part of Champlain's Quebec colony. Brule took a serious interest in Native American language, mastering several languages of the people here in North America. Champlain took note of his talents and sent him to live with the Algonquins to learn their ways. Brule is the first European to shoot the Lachine Rapids and ascend the Ottawa and descend the French rivers to Lake Huron. Upon his return from a year in the woods, Champlain was mighty pleased he came back in one piece, and Brule indicated the Hurons were good hosts and treated him well. This experience committed Brule to spend his life exploring the wilderness, meeting new peoples, finding new lands. He spent a considerable amount of time exploring the eastern Great Lakes and St. Lawrence. Unfortunately for us, Brule was illiterate, and all we have are his verbal accounts transcribed by others. To complicate the historical record, there's an absence of history regarding Brule's travels from July 1611 to July 1615. It is assumed he was living with the Hurons, learning their language and traditions. In the summer of 1615, Brule and Champlain, accompanied by Hurons, traveled the Ottawa French River route to Lake Huron. These stories have him traveling to Lakes Erie, Ontario, into Pennsylvania, and even into Ohio. However, we will never know for certain, as much of these travels are in dispute, with the exception of him being the first person of European descent to explore the eastern shore of Lake Huron and finding today's Sault Ste. Marie. It is suspected, but not proven, that he explored Lake Superior, possibly circumnavigating it. Brule was accompanied by a man only known as Grinnell, and having collected intelligence about the water route to his Great Sea, as they've been told about, they plied the waters along the Lake Huron coast up the St. Mary's to what is known as Sault Ste. Marie. Here, thousands of Algonquins were living and fishing the waters for abundant whitefish. Here were Ojibwas, a nation of the Algonquin. Historians are not in agreement whether or not Brule and Grinnell paddled Lake Superior or even saw it. A reasonable person would at least believe they laid eyes on this largest freshwater lakes, being so close at the Sioux. A historian says the interpreter, Brule, assured us that beyond the freshwater sea, known as Lake Huron today, there was another very large lake which empties into it by a waterfall, which has been called Sault de Gaston, or Gaston Falls, also known today as Sault Ste. Marie. And this width was almost 2 leagues, which the lake and the freshwater sea have almost 30 days' journey by canoe in length, according to the account of the savages, or as we now know, Native Americans. But according to the interpreter, or Brule's account, they are 400 leagues in length. Brule and Grinnell were the first Europeans to Lake Superior. This is, although still in debate, it is most likely that they did. This was finally Champlain's North Sea, or so he thought. But alas, the waters were fresh. It could not be the ocean on which China and the Far East lie. Sagard, the first biographer of Brule, relates in his notes that Brule claimed the length of Lake Superior in Huron was 400 leagues, which is close to the actual distance that they really are. Brule could have obtained this information in one of two ways: from information gleaned from Native Americans, or actually having paddled the southern shore of Lake Superior to its head, then today's Duluth, at the mouth of the St. Louis River. As Brule and Grinnell were absent for 2 years, this undertaking wasn't out of the question as it relates to the amount of time needed or difficulty. It is suspected that Brule may have used the portage route between the river bearing his name and the St. Croix, which would put him on a tributary of the Mississippi. However, we have no written or physical proof of him traversing past Sault Ste. Marie. Brule could also be considered the first, or one of the first, coureurs de bois, or runners of the woods. Not to be confused with voyagers, coureurs de bois were rugged Frenchmen who lived with Native Americans year-round, even in the winter. They assisted the Native Americans in collecting furs, packing them into canoes, and brought them to trading settlements. Coureurs de bois were required by law to obtain licenses from the French colonial governor to trade furs. They typically ignored these rules. Voyagers, on the other hand, were licensed and didn't collect furs on their own, but traded trinkets, tools, and other items of value to Native Americans. Brule never returned to Lake Huron, and in 1629, he defected to the British. In 1632, he was considered a traitor by the Hurons, the very Native Americans who he thought were so hospitable. and he was subsequently captured, tortured, quartered, and thrown into a stew pot and then eaten. To read more, find Brule's discoveries and explorations by Consul Wilshire Butterfield, which can be found on Google Books as a download. The year that Brule discovered Sault Ste. Marie is in some dispute as well. I've seen it as early as 1618 and as late as 1622, but the accepted date is in 1620. In fact, he found Sault Ste. Marie before the Pilgrims land the Mayflower. So it's been 400 years since Europeans have seen the state of Michigan. All right. Thank you for learning about Etienne Brule. And this is Tom Funk with Trail Tales and my Portages, Paddles, and Pathways segment. If you have any questions, need a clarification, see me on my social media. The best way to get a hold of me is Tom Funk's Worldly Adventures on Facebook. Send me a message, and I will get back to you. All right, thanks again, everybody. We'll see you again. Thanks for listening.